We've been talking about the North. Let's speak to a Northern Conservative MP, Jake Berry. He represents Rossendale and Darwen. That's in Lancashire. Jake, first of all, tell us, what's it like in your constituency with COVID at the moment?
We're over 400 per 100,000. I represent 2 local authorities. It's a mixed picture, but both of them are high. But what you have to remember is, of course, Tier 2, which came in yesterday for my constituents, was a relaxation of the position we have been in since August. And during that Tier 2 style lockdown that we have had across large parts of the north of England since August, our rates have gone up tenfold. So I think there's a healthy spoonful of skepticism that Tier 2 is going to work in Lancashire.
So are you saying then that the lockdown rules that you've had so far really haven't worked in controlling the virus?
Well, self-evidently they haven't, based on the number. Of course, we don't know what would have happened if we hadn't have had the Tier 2 style lockdown since late summer. But what I would say is this, my impression is, and I disagree with quite a lot of that polling, because I think it gives people a false choice. People will always choose health over money. I think anyone with a brain would choose that. But when I go around Lancashire, I talk to people and talk to council leaders across Lancashire. The impression I get is very different, is that most people are simply ignoring everything that's being said in Westminster. They aren't really paying attention to Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. They've sort of made up their own mind how they're going to deal with this disease. They kind of comply with what they believe the rules are, but in truth, most people don't know or understand what the rules are. And it's not because we are thick or stupid in Lancashire, it's because they keep changing. And since August, I think across large parts of the north of England, we're now on our 19th or 20th different set of rules. So we have a sort of self-imposed and decided upon lockdown rules, which people are consistently following to try and keep themselves safe. But it's not, doesn't bear much resemblance to what the government wants us to do, in my experience.
Interesting. Isn't the government right to have gone this local lockdown route, to have different rules depending on the state of COVID in different regions or cities or so on? Or if we wanted, I saw you said to LBC, we need simple rules and a simple message. Well, rightly or wrongly, you could say that a national circuit breaker was that.
Well, look, the government is right to have imposed these national restrictions. Of course, we're talking about Rossendale and Darwen this evening. We'll be talking about Reading and Dagenham in just a couple of months' time, I'm sorry to say, or even a couple of weeks' time. So having a national system which people can understand and is simple is a country mile better than the confusing and sort of, mishmash of rules that we've had across the north of England. But crucially, and this is where the government has got it absolutely right this week, it needs to be turned on and off according to local data. And that's why actually I don't favour a national lockdown, but I would be pretty relaxed actually about a local circuit breaker in Lancashire, because in truth, we've been in Tier 2 since August. It hasn't worked. So we need not to continue what we know doesn't work. I think we'd be up for trying something else. And a local lockdown across Lancashire, Manchester and Merseyside, based on their data, if that's what they want, I think would be the right thing to do from where we are today.
So who should have the responsibility for deciding to go into a local circuit breaker?
Well, I think it should be based on the data. I mean, if we based it on data, it wouldn't fall upon the government.
But who would take the decision?
Local council leaders. Well, I've called on the government to set out a clear gateway, both in and out of lockdown and these tiers, and also to publish information. It's sort of, we're not telling people in Lancashire whether we're doing well or badly with what we're doing. This test and trace app, it cannot be beyond the wit of man to embed data in the test and trace app about how we are doing. If you visit any church hall across the country, they will probably have a thermometer on the wall telling you how near they're getting for their church roof appeal. We like targets. People like to know that what they're doing is working. So I think if you had a clear and fixed gateway where you came in and out of tiers, that the decision would be made by the data, not by local or national politicians.
Yeah, but data doesn't take decisions. Data informs decisions. I'm still not quite clear who would take the decision in the end. Would it be local government or would it be national government?
Well, it would have to be a combination of both. But if you said, for example, if your rate is over 400,000 per 100,000, your transmission rate is over X or your hospitalization rate is over Y, it would come to a point that you would then have local and national politicians saying, we have gone past the trigger point. Now is the time for us to implement tier 3 lockdown or a circuit breaker lockdown, whatever it may be. But at least the public would then not see this bickering between Northern Labour mayors and number 10 and ministers. They would say, well, actually, this is based on real science, real data that we can understand and we are part of. Therefore, we support the decision. I just don't think with the current state of decision making that I think we've lost the public, frankly, in many parts of the north of England.
Has the government therefore not handled the north well?
Well, I think it certainly could have handled the north better. I think our messaging has been poor. I think we've, as I said, I think we've lost large parts of the public's attention in the north of England. It feels to me, funnily enough, a bit like Brexit felt just as we were coming up towards the general election, that we were bickering about things in Parliament. And most people I spoke to about, well, we voted for it. We don't care how you do it. Just get on with it. When I talk to people across the north of England, they say, look, we don't want you bickering in Parliament about what's going on and whether we should listen to our mayor or council leader or government. We just want you to get on with tackling this disease. And that may be a completely unreasonable ask of the public. It's very, very difficult. But it sort of feels to me that that's where their opinion is. And that's a very dangerous moment for Parliament. And it's a very dangerous moment for these northern mayors, I think, as well.
Could be dangerous for your party too. I mean, the Conservative Party is now, to some extent, the party of the North since the December 2019 election. You're no longer just the party of the leafy home counties. Are you in danger with the way the government's gone about this of losing the North?
Well, I think it's far too early to talk about losing the North, but there are 80 Northern MPs, we are literally the Prime Minister's majority, so he needs to look after us bluntly. But I also think Labour's in quite a lot of trouble with this as well, because what we are now seeing is a big division opening between the Labour mayors of the north of England, who are pushing the government saying every single decision should be based on local data and on what local politicians think. And of course, Keir Starmer, who's calling for a national lockdown. That's all very well. It may be the right thing to do in parts of the north of England to have a circuit breaker. But what I don't want to see is when rates go up in Cornwall or in the south of England, for the north to be pushed into another national circuit breaker, just as our numbers have gone down and our economy is starting to recover. So yes, there is divisions within the Conservative Party, but I think that move by Keir Starmer this week was a bigger mistake than we yet realise, because it's creating big division both with him and his MPs in the north of England, who many of his MPs are campaigning to have a local approach. And of course, many of these mayors who are absolutely appearing on our TV channels every night saying it has to be a locally led approach. That's not what Keir's suggesting. And I think it's starting to cause him some trouble.
And yet Andy Burnham, the mayor of Manchester, and others seem to imply, or seem to say, take the position that they would rather have a national circuit breaker, as Mr. Starmer calls it, than being placed into a tier by central government. Are they right?
Well, I don't think they are. I don't think a national circuit breaker is the right way to go. I support many of the arguments Andy Burnham's made. Actually, I've supported them in the Commons about we have to have local data guiding these decisions. Why should Cornwall be put in lockdown now? Okay, that's bad for Cornwall now, but my real concern, as I've said, is in 2-3 months' time, I don't want my constituency put back into lockdown because they've got COVID in the south.
So let me just get you to sum up, Jake Berry. What should, take your constituency and the surrounding areas or areas in the north that have a similar number of COVID cases, what should the proper way ahead be as we sit here tonight for your area?
Okay, so the 3-tiered system has been in now just for 24 hours. The incubation period for this disease is 14 days. So we simply can't say whether this tier 2, tier 3 is going to work yet. So I think we have to give it at least 2 weeks. Although I say there is a large spoon of skepticism across the north of England, because we look at many of these restrictions and say, well, we've had them for over 2 months and they haven't worked. But I want to give the scientists and the computer models the benefit of the doubt. So let's give them a fortnight. If things haven't moved by then, if we are still seeing a rapid increase in growth rate of this disease and transmissibility within the community, I don't think there is any other choice for the government except to move to some form of circuit breaker based on local data. And I think it should be done on a county by county basis. So you would choose to do Lancashire, you may then choose to do Greater Manchester, Merseyside, maybe areas of West Yorkshire. And we go in and out of that circuit breaker based on local data. So Liverpool may be in it for a fortnight, Lancashire may be in it for 3 weeks, Greater Manchester in it for a month. So be it. But each one of those local circuit breakers has to be backed by proper government financial support. And that's really what we're looking to the Chancellor now to come forward, if we do go into that situation, to say how the government's going to support people and businesses throughout what will be a difficult and cold and miserable period in the winter.
You don't think the government's done enough, do you, on that front?
No, I think that we should be doing more. I've been quite clear that I think we should keep the 80% wage subsidy for those who are low paid. You can do that by guaranteeing 80% of the wages up to a different level. It's currently 66.6% up to 2,100. We of course could say, well, you know, the first 1,000 or the first 1,200 quid will guarantee 80%. But we're coming towards Christmas, and people who often work in the hospitality industry on low wages, you know, will be feeling the pinch already, hospitality having been shut down for much of the year. And I don't think it's unreasonable for them to say to the government, actually, we expect you to keep supporting our wages at 80%.